No one stopped to help the dying old man in his pajamas. But one poor courier did, without knowing who he had saved. Subscribe so you don't miss the next stories. Write in the comments which city you're from. The morning sun hung low over the faded rooftops of the trailer park in Westlake, casting long slanted shadows across the cracked pavement and the rows of rusting mailboxes. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. The smell of reheated coffee and exhaust fumes mingled in the cool air, giving the start of another Monday a tired kind of clarity. Inside Unit 7B, the hum of an old refrigerator served as the only soundtrack to the quiet scurry of 15-year-old Lucas Bright as he tiptoed through the cramped living space. The trailer was narrow and worn, its wallpaper peeling in places, the floor creaking with every careful step. Lucas moved like someone used to not waking others, his movements efficient and quiet. The microwave beeped softly, and he quickly pulled out a bowl of instant oatmeal, stirring in powdered cinnamon with one hand while unscrewing the cap off a generic asthma inhaler with the other. He knelt beside the worn-out sofa bed where his younger sister, Emmy, slept beneath a pile of mismatched blankets. Her breathing was audible, just enough rasp to make his stomach tighten, but not enough to warrant waking their mom. Lucas gently nudged her. "Hey," he whispered, brushing a strand of tangled hair from her forehead. "Oatmeal's ready." Emmy blinked up at him sleepily. "With cinnamon?" Lucas smiled. "Of course." He helped her sit up, handed her the bowl, and watched as she took a small spoonful. She was 8, pale and small for her age, with eyes too big for her face and a perpetual look of someone carrying something heavier than a child should. Asthma had worn her down over the years, but she never complained. Their mother, Angela, stirred in the back bedroom, exhausted from working a night shift at the hospital. Lucas made a mental note to tell her he restocked Emmy's medicine yesterday at the clinic, paid for with tip money from his deliveries. She'd scold him for spending too much, but he didn't care. Emmy needed it more than he needed a new phone or lunch money. He checked his battered smartphone, cracks across the screen like a spider web. His delivery app, SparkGrub, blinked to life with 4 new pending jobs and 1 marked Express Priority. Prepaid, perishable, must deliver in 30 mens. He tapped Accept, zipped his delivery bag shut, kissed his sister on the forehead, and stepped outside. His bike waited where it always did, locked to the broken chain-link fence near their mailbox. It was too small for him now, the seat duct-taped, the gears moody, but it worked. He hopped on, adjusted his faded baseball cap, and took off down the street. Lucas wasn't the kind of kid people noticed. He wasn't tall or loud or particularly handsome. He was one of those wiry, tired-looking kids with eyes that had seen too much too early, who moved with purpose and didn't waste words. That morning, as he pedaled toward his first stop, the wind in his face felt like freedom. SparkGrub didn't care if you were 15 or 50, as long as you had wheels, a working phone, and signed the right digital waiver. Lucas had lied about his age, just by a year, but in this world, no one looked too closely. He worked fast, delivered hot, and never stole. That made him one of the best-rated riders in his zone. Traffic on West 6th Street was typical for mid-morning. Honks, idling engines, buses hissing to a halt. Lucas weaved past pedestrians, careful not to hit anyone. He liked this part of the job, the movement, the rhythm, the quiet time to think. He knew the side alleys, the fastest routes, which restaurants lagged, and which office workers tipped better. He had mapped the city in his head like a GPS built from survival. He was halfway to the drop-off, a high-rise apartment near Wilshire, when he saw him. It was impossible to ignore. At first, Lucas thought it was a pile of laundry someone had dumped on the sidewalk, but something felt off. The man was slumped on the curb in front of a strip of closed storefronts, wearing only a wrinkled button-down pajama top, light blue cotton, now streaked with dirt, and a pair of scuffed house slippers. His skin was dark, wrinkled, and visibly sun-dried. His hands shook. Lucas slowed to a crawl. People walked past the man like he didn't exist. A suited man stepped over his legs, muttering under his breath. A woman crossed the street. Someone else paused long enough to snap a photo. Lucas stopped his bike. His fingers hovered over his handlebars. He glanced at his delivery app. Timer ticking, 17 minutes left. The man on the curb raised his head slightly and blinked toward him. His eyes were clouded, confused. "Sir?" Lucas called out. The man didn't respond right away. Then, in a raspy voice, he whispered, "Where's Diana?" Lucas parked the bike, hesitated, then walked over, crouching carefully. "Are you hurt?" The old man stared at him, lips trembling. "I was going to the garden, but I forgot something." He looked down at his hands like they belonged to someone else. "I don't remember." Lucas looked around. Still, nobody was helping. Just stares, judgment, and distance. "Do you know where you live?" "I don't. I woke up and—" He paused. "My wife, Diana, she makes tea." Lucas swallowed hard. The man wasn't drunk. He wasn't on drugs. He was lost. He pulled out his phone and opened Google Maps. No use. The man didn't know an address, no wallet, no ID. "Do you have a phone? Maybe I can call someone for you." The man blinked. "Do I have a phone?" He checked his pajama pocket, empty. Lucas sighed, looked at the app again. 10 minutes left. Delivery window closing. He had a choice. Deliver the package, get paid, stay on schedule, or help this stranger. His thoughts were interrupted by a car horn. A driver leaned out the window. "Get out of the way, kid." Lucas stood. "We need help," he shouted. "This man's lost." The driver scoffed and drove off. The old man's breathing grew shallower. Lucas turned back to him. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'm not leaving you here." He ran to his bike, opened the delivery bag, and pulled out the container of food. Chicken Alfredo, still warm. He set it beside the man, twisted off the lid, and handed him a plastic fork. "Eat. I'll get help." The man stared at it, confused but grateful. He took a small bite. Lucas walked down the block to a nearby urgent care clinic, pushing the door open hard enough to make the receptionist flinch. "Hey, there's a man out front. He's confused. He needs help." "We can't admit people without ID," the woman said without looking up. "He doesn't have ID," Lucas snapped. "He has memory loss. I think he wandered off from somewhere. He could be sick." Another nurse, hearing the commotion, came to the front. She glanced out the glass window. "That man? In the pajamas?" "Yes." She hesitated, then nodded to the receptionist. "Call Dr. Owens. Let's bring him in." Lucas exhaled. "Thank you." It took 10 more minutes to gently lead the man inside. He shuffled slowly, leaning on Lucas for support. The boy winced at how fragile he felt. Bones too light, like his body had forgotten how to stand. Inside, the medical team moved with a clinical efficiency. Vitals were taken, blood drawn. A small tag was placed around his wrist. Unknown, male, approx. 80 years. Alert, but disoriented. Lucas sat outside the exam room, watching the door. His phone buzzed. App notification. Delivery failed. Account suspended for violation of service terms. He stared at the screen, then turned it off. He had no job now, but the man was safe. And that had to count for something. Outside, the sun had climbed higher, burning against the pavement. Lucas leaned back in the hard plastic chair, the buzzing of fluorescent lights above him, wondering if anyone had noticed the man was missing, or if, without a name, no one even knew he was gone. He couldn't explain it, but something about the man's eyes stayed with him. Not the confusion, but the flicker of hope when Lucas had stopped. He didn't know the man's name, but somehow Lucas had a feeling this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Lucas had never sat in a waiting room this long. The plastic chair beneath him had gone from uncomfortable to invisible. His body had grown numb from stillness, but his mind kept running. Through the narrow window, he could see the old man lying on a hospital bed, a thin blanket covering his legs, machines quietly humming nearby. Nurses came in and out. They spoke softly, professionally, as if trying not to startle a ghost. It had been nearly an hour since they brought him in, and still no one knew who he was. Lucas's phone was dead. He had no charger, no money to buy one, and even if he did, there wasn't much use now. The delivery app had sent 3 coldly worded notifications before locking him out completely. He had known the risk when he stopped, but it still stung. The job was more than a paycheck. It was survival. It was groceries, medicine, rent. He rubbed his eyes and sat back, staring at the linoleum floor, remembering the man's voice. "Where's Diana?" The name felt important. A clue. He had said it like it meant everything. When the door beside him creaked open, Lucas looked up. A nurse stepped out, young, maybe mid-20s, wearing pink scrubs with cartoon cats on them. Her name tag read Maria. "He's stable," she said, "dehydrated, exhausted, confused, but physically fine." Lucas let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "That's good." "We ran some basic neurological tests," she continued, lowering her voice. "There's definitely memory loss, early-stage dementia, maybe. Could also be a fugue state. We won't know until he's fully alert." Lucas stood. "Can I see him?" Maria hesitated, then nodded. "Just for a minute. He keeps asking if the boy with the bicycle is still here." The room smelled like antiseptic and something else, faintly floral, oddly familiar. The old man looked smaller in the hospital bed, like the weight of confusion had shrunk him. His eyes were open, searching, but unfocused. When he saw Lucas, something shifted in his expression. "You came back," he said, voice dry but calm. "I never left," Lucas replied, stepping closer. The man reached out slowly, his fingers trembling. Lucas took his hand without hesitation. "They said I wandered," the man murmured, "but I don't remember where from." "We'll figure it out," Lucas said. "I was looking for the garden." Lucas nodded. "You mentioned that before, and someone named Diana." The old man closed his eyes for a moment. "Diana," he whispered, as if the name itself was a lullaby. "She makes chamomile tea with honey. Is she your wife?" "She has a red robe," he said instead, "with gold buttons. She wears it in the mornings when the birds are loud." Lucas didn't push. The fragments came like waves, unpredictable and scattered, but they were something. The fact that the man remembered small details meant there was still a thread to follow. Outside the room, Lucas found Maria again. He keeps mentioning someone named Diana, and a garden. Maybe it's a care facility. Maria shrugged. "It could be. We've contacted local police and care homes. No one's reported a missing person matching his description." "No ID?" "Nothing." "What about his clothes? The pajamas?" "Custom stitched, expensive fabric, silk blend, monogrammed with RH." Lucas blinked. "So he's rich. Or someone who used to be," she said. "It's not uncommon. We get seniors with dementia all the time who slip away from their homes or facilities. Sometimes even from families who pretend to care." Lucas glanced back through the window. The man was staring at the ceiling now, lips moving silently. "He's not a nobody," Lucas said. "He talks like someone who's lived a life, a real life. Gardens and birds and chamomile tea. That's not street talk." Maria smiled faintly. "You have a good heart." "I just didn't want him to die on the sidewalk." She touched his shoulder. "Stay with him a little longer. I'll bring a phone charger." Lucas nodded and returned to the chair outside the room. It was almost noon now. He imagined Emmy finishing her lunch at school, his mom still asleep after the graveyard shift, unaware of how her son had lost his job for a stranger. He pulled out his notebook, the one he kept in his backpack for school assignments, and began scribbling. Unknown man, approx. 80, African American, pajamas, high-end, monogrammed, RH repeats, Diana, mentions tea, birds, garden, likely dementia, no ID, no phone, no wallet, no missing person match, no family contacted, alone. He stopped writing, looked at the list, then flipped to a clean page. On it, he wrote, "What if this happened to someone I loved?" That question hung over him as he sat beside the room, hour after hour, watching the door, hoping for something to change. Someone to walk in. Some nurse to say, "We found his family." But no one came. In the late afternoon, Maria returned with a smile and handed him a borrowed charger and an energy bar. "You're making an impression," she said. "He won't eat unless you're nearby." Lucas looked up. "Really?" Maria nodded. "He trusts you." Lucas plugged in his phone and, for the first time that day, opened social media. He hesitated only a moment, then opened the camera app and turned toward the hallway window. He snapped a picture, not of the man himself, but of the closed door with a sign that read, "Room 204, private patient." Then he opened TikTok. Caption, "This man was sitting on the street this morning in LA. He doesn't know who he is. No ID, no family, just kept saying Diana and the garden. If anyone recognizes him, please share. Let's find his people." He uploaded the photo, tagged it with #missing#, elderly # memory loss, and hit post. The view counter started slow. 5, 11, 22. He put the phone away. Either someone would see it or they wouldn't. The next morning, the video had over 10,000 views. Comments flooded in at Bria Latina. "This man looks so familiar. I think he used to be on the board at a library fundraiser." At Lil Rit Joey, "My grandma says he looks like a man named Mr. Holloway that used to own property near Santa Monica. Could be him." At Jasmine, "That pajama top is from a luxury brand in Beverly Hills. Check their clients." Lucas's heart raced. He replied to a few comments, added updates. Within an hour, a reporter messaged him asking for an interview. He declined. He wasn't in this for clout. He just wanted someone to know that this man mattered. By the afternoon, Lucas returned to the clinic to find the atmosphere changed. Security guards now stood by the doors. A black SUV with tinted windows idled at the curb. A sharply dressed man in a dark suit was speaking to the head nurse. When Lucas walked in, all eyes turned to him. The suited man stepped forward. "Are you Lucas Bright?" Lucas nodded slowly. "Yes." The man extended a hand. "My name is Julian Price. I work with the Holloway family." Lucas blinked. "Holloway?" "Yes," Price said. "The man you found is Richard Holloway. He's the founder and former CEO of Holloway Group Holdings. He's also been missing for 30 hours. We've been searching the city." Lucas felt a strange chill rise up his spine. "So, he really is someone?" Price smiled tightly. "He's more than someone. He's a man with a legacy." Behind them, the door to room 204 opened. Richard Holloway appeared, supported by Maria, his eyes lighting up at the sight of Lucas. "There he is," Richard said, pointing weakly. "My friend with the wheels." Lucas smiled. "Hey." Julian turned. "Sir, we're taking you home." Richard hesitated. "Can the boy come with us?" Lucas opened his mouth to decline, unsure what to say. Julian looked at him. "Actually, Mr. Holloway insisted you be invited. He remembers your kindness. You gave him food?" Yeah, Alfredo." "He talked about that," Julian said with a surprising softness. "Said it tasted like a memory." Lucas followed them outside, watching the way the world bent for Richard Holloway, how doors opened, how people stepped aside, how silence followed him. Before getting in the car, Richard turned to Lucas and said something that stayed with him long after the vehicle disappeared into traffic. "You didn't know who I was, but you stopped anyway. That means you know who you are." And just like that, Lucas realized the man without a name had just reminded him of his own. Lucas didn't sleep that night. He had tried. He'd closed his eyes, pulled the thin blanket over his chest, turned his pillow to the cooler side twice, but nothing worked. His brain refused rest. Every time he drifted near sleep, images flooded his thoughts. The gentle tremble in Richard Holloway's voice, the name Diana, the look in the nurse's eyes when the black SUV arrived, and that final sentence before the car pulled away. "You didn't know who I was, but you stopped anyway." It echoed, loud as thunder and soft as a whisper. By morning, Lucas was at the kitchen table, chin in hand, eyes heavy, watching his sister Emmy eat dry cereal with a quiet crunch. Their mother moved around the cramped kitchen behind her, packing a lunch bag with precise, tired movements. She was always tired lately, the weight of bills and late shifts etched into the curve of her shoulders. "I saw your video," she said without turning around. "You're on the news." Lucas looked up. "They used your picture on Channel 7, called you the boy with the bike. Said you helped a missing billionaire." He flushed. "They got my name wrong. I'm not a hero." His mother finally turned, placing Emmy's sandwich into her backpack. "Maybe not to the world, but you were to that man." Lucas didn't reply. He wasn't looking for praise. He hadn't done it for attention. He'd done it because it felt like the only right thing left to do in a world full of wrong. An hour later, he stood outside their trailer, phone in hand, staring at the message blinking on the screen. Spark Grub account, permanently suspended, violation of service terms. He sighed, shoved the phone in his pocket, and unlocked his bike. It was only when he turned toward the main road that he noticed the car. It wasn't just any car. It was a sleek, silver Mercedes, polished to a shine that reflected every crack in the sidewalk. A man leaned against the hood. Tall, early 40s, dressed in a tailored navy suit, his posture relaxed but purposeful. "Lucas Bright?" the man called. Lucas hesitated. "Yeah? I'm Michael Holloway. Richard Holloway is my father." Lucas approached slowly, unsure of what to expect. Michael extended a hand. His grip was firm, confident, but his expression held a weight that didn't quite match his professional demeanor. "My father keeps talking about you," he said. "Says you're the only reason he's alive right now." Lucas shook his head. "I just found him on the street." And stayed, and fed him, and waited. That's more than most people would have done. Lucas didn't argue. "I'd like you to come with me," Michael said. "My father asked for you, personally." Lucas blinked. "He remembers me?" "He doesn't remember what he ate for dinner last night. Michael said dryly, "but he remembers you." Lucas nodded slowly. "Okay, let me tell my mom." 10 minutes later, he was in the back seat of the Mercedes, his bike folded in the trunk, the city sliding by outside the tinted windows. The streets he normally pedaled through felt different from this vantage point. Smaller, slower, almost distant. The buildings looked less like obstacles and more like silent monuments to lives he'd never live. They pulled up to a mansion in the hills, surrounded by wrought iron gates and trimmed hedges that looked like something from a movie. The driveway was long, curving past a fountain shaped like a lion. Lucas stepped out slowly, sneakers crunching on gravel. Inside, the house was cool, quiet, and far too big. White marble floors stretched beneath high ceilings. Artwork hung in careful symmetry on the walls. A maid passed by, offering a polite nod. Lucas followed Michael down a hallway until they reached a sunroom filled with plants and natural light. Richard Holloway sat in a large wicker chair, a blanket draped over his knees, a teacup balanced in one hand. He looked up and smiled when he saw Lucas. "There he is," Richard said warmly. "My Alfredo angel." Lucas grinned. "You remember that?" "Hard to forget the best meal I've had in weeks." Michael gestured for Lucas to sit. Richard leaned forward slightly. "They told me you stayed," he said, "even when no one else did." Lucas shrugged. "Didn't feel right leaving you there." "That's the thing, son," Richard said. "Most people wait until something affects them directly before they care. But you didn't." Michael stepped closer. "We want to help you." Lucas blinked. "Help me?" "You lost your job because you helped my father," Michael said. "We'd like to make sure that doesn't become a punishment." Richard added, "And I'd like to make a request." Lucas looked between them. "I want you to work with us," Richard said. "Help the foundation. We run outreach programs for at-risk youth. You've lived it. You know what it means to have no one." Lucas hesitated. "I'm just a kid." "That's exactly why you'll matter," Richard said. "They'll listen to you." Michael nodded. "And we'll make sure your sister and mother are taken care of. School, health, housing, all of it." Lucas felt like he was floating. None of it made sense. It was too big, too fast. "I need to think," he said. "Of course," Michael replied. "We'll give you time." As Lucas walked out through the marble foyer, he saw himself in the giant mirror by the front door. A skinny kid in thrift store jeans and a stretched hoodie. Out of place. A visitor in someone else's world. Yet, somehow, he was part of it now. The next day, the headlines exploded. Teen delivers hope. The story of Lucas Bright. Billionaire found by courier. Kindness that saved a life. Boy with the bike. The viral hero who asked for nothing. Lucas's phone was flooded with messages. Journalists, influencers, local politicians. Some wanted interviews. Some offered money for exclusive stories. A few offered sponsorship deals for youth gear. He declined them all. He didn't want attention. He wanted change. He accepted the offer from the Holloway Foundation quietly, starting as a volunteer assistant. He helped distribute food, packed hygiene kits, organized youth events. At night, he took the bus home to their new apartment. Nothing fancy, but clean and safe. His mother cried the first time she saw the kitchen with working appliances and no mold on the ceiling. Emmy had her own room for the first time in her life. Lucas got his bike repaired and painted. He still used it every day. At the foundation, he met kids like himself. Smart, angry, funny, scared all at once. Some trusted him. Some didn't. But slowly they began to listen. Richard visited the center often. His memory flickered in and out, but he always remembered Lucas. One afternoon, while sorting canned goods, Lucas heard a voice behind him. "You're becoming a leader." He turned to see Michael standing in the doorway. "You're making an impact," Michael said. "The staff talk about you. The kids trust you. I think my father was right." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "You see people, really see them. That's rare." Lucas looked down at his hands. "I don't want to be anything special." "Then you're already more than you know." But not everyone was impressed. In an office across town behind tinted windows and a polished oak desk, a man watched the same news reports with narrowing eyes. Bradley Hunley, a former branch manager at Spark Grub and an old friend of Michael's from business school, sipped whiskey as the video played again. The boy smiled. The crowd clapped. He paused the video. "No one gets this lucky by accident," he muttered. He opened his laptop and began typing. Anonymous tip: "Your golden boy isn't who you think. Ask him why he was really there. Start digging." He hit send. And, just like that, a shadow entered the bright new world Lucas had begun to build. The anonymous message arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. Michael Holloway had just finished his second espresso when the email alert blinked across the top of his tablet screen. He tapped it absently, expecting a reminder from the foundation's legal team or an update on the board meeting schedule. But what he saw instead made him sit up straighter in his leather chair, the tablet now held in both hands. Subject urgent. "You need to know this message. Your golden boy isn't who he says he is. Ask him why he was really there. Check again. There's more to the story than you know. You're being used." It was unsigned, of course. Just a coward's note wrapped in suspicion. But the timing, the wording, it was deliberate. Someone wanted to stir doubt. And worst of all, it worked. Michael lowered the tablet and stared at the view beyond his office window, the sprawl of Los Angeles stretching out in its usual haze. His mind wasn't there. It was racing back to the first day his father had asked for the boy. Lucas Bright. Michael had seen a lot in his years: investment meetings, trust fund implosions, PR disasters, but never had he seen his father so calm, so lucid, so alive as when Lucas was in the room. It had unnerved him at first. Now it felt like an anchor, one he couldn't afford to misjudge. Still, the message lingered. And when you grow up in a world of money, politics, and fragile power, you learn early to never ignore anonymous whispers. He forwarded the message to someone he trusted, a quiet man named Omar who handled private investigations for Holloway Group. Discreet, thorough, invisible. "Run a background on the incident," Michael wrote. "Footage, witnesses, police reports. I want full clarity. If he lied, I need to know." He stared at the message for a long time before hitting send. Meanwhile, Lucas knew nothing of any of it. He was too busy rebuilding his life one early morning and one quiet choice at a time. At the foundation, his days were filled with real things: boxes, people, problems that didn't need suits or strategy. He was good at listening, better at helping, and best at keeping his head down. But something had shifted. He noticed it in small moments: the way some staff whispered when he passed, the pause in conversation when he entered a room, the glance of a security guard who used to greet him with a smile but now only nodded stiffly. It was the kind of unease you couldn't name, but felt deep in your gut, and Lucas had spent enough of his life on the edge of things to recognize when the air turned cold. He told himself he was imagining it. Paranoia, maybe, but the doubt crept in. The worst part was Richard had been asking for him less. Some days he was too tired to come down from his room. Other days his memory slid like sand through fingers, and when Lucas did sit beside him, he would ask, "Do I know you?" in a soft voice that cut sharper than any blade. Lucas understood. He didn't take it personally, but it hurt all the same. Then came Saturday. It had rained the night before, and the streets still glistened with morning drizzle when Lucas returned from tutoring. He'd enrolled in night classes, math, writing, business foundations, and had started dreaming again, cautiously, of college. The idea felt far away still, like a window he could see through but not touch. But it was there. He reached the foundation just before noon. As he stepped into the foyer, soaked and breathing hard from pedaling uphill, he heard a voice echo from Michael's office. "I don't care what it costs. Check everything. If she was there, I want to know. Connections, time logs, CCTV, everything. No more questions. I want the truth." Lucas froze. The voice was unmistakable. Michael. His heart pounded. Was he talking about him? He backed away from the hallway quietly, the sound of his wet sneakers against the polished floor muffled by the carpet runners. He didn't ask questions. He didn't confront. Instead, he walked out the side door, water dripping from the hem of his hoodie, and sat on the back bench behind the building, staring at the cracked pavement and wondering if it had all been too good to be true. That evening, the air inside the Holloway estate was unusually tense. Dinner was quiet. Richard didn't come down. The maids moved with nervous energy. Even Emmy seemed to sense it, playing with her mashed potatoes instead of eating. Lucas sat at the table trying to ignore the weight on his chest until the maid approached him hesitantly. "Sir," she said, holding out a small piece of paper, "there's a woman at the gate. She says she knows you." Lucas frowned. "Who?" She wouldn't give a name, just asked that I give you this. He unfolded the note. The handwriting was jagged, rushed. "I know what happened to your parents. Come outside alone. Don't tell him." Lucas read it twice, then again. His hands trembled. He stood and left without saying a word. Outside, the gate stood half open, the security guard nowhere in sight. Under the flickering light of the street lamp stood a woman wrapped in a thin scarf, her clothes soaked at the hem, her face lined with age and fatigue. Lucas approached slowly. "You said you knew my parents," he said. The woman looked up. Her eyes were sharp beneath heavy lids, her voice low and cracked. "I was your neighbor." Lucas stared. "You knew them?" She nodded. "My name is Stella. I lived 2 doors down. I saw what happened the night they died." Lucas's breath caught. The night had haunted him for years, a memory wrapped in screams, sirens, the echo of police boots on linoleum. The break-in, the shots, the silence. "No one ever told us anything," he whispered. Stella nodded. "Because they didn't want you to know." Lucas took a step forward. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then continued. "It wasn't a robbery. Your father, he worked for someone powerful. There was land involved, a deal he refused to sign. The man didn't like hearing no." Lucas felt the world tilt under his feet. "Who?" "I don't know his name," she admitted. "But that night, I saw a black SUV outside your trailer. Not like any car I'd seen around here. Tinted windows. A man inside on the phone waiting. The others went in. They came out fast, clean. They didn't take anything." Lucas shook his head. "That can't be." They made it look like a robbery, but it was a message. Tears burned behind his eyes. "Why didn't you come forward?" "I was scared," she said, "and I thought, what good would it do? But when I saw you on the news, helping that man, I thought maybe you deserved to know the truth." Lucas stared at her, breath ragged. "Do you have anything? A name? A plate number?" Stella reached into her coat and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "I wrote this down that night. I don't know why I kept it, but I did." He unfolded the note, a license plate, out of state. "Thank you," he whispered, gripping it like a lifeline. She nodded once, then disappeared into the shadows. The next morning, Lucas walked into Michael's study. Michael looked up, surprised to see him. Before he could speak, Lucas dropped the note on the desk. "I need your help," he said. Michael read it, eyebrows narrowing. "What is this?" "A license plate. From the night my parents died. Someone just gave it to me. I think it's connected." Michael leaned back slowly. "Where did you get this?" "I met someone last night. A neighbor. A witness." Michael watched him for a long moment. "You should have told me earlier." "I heard you," Lucas said quietly. "You were investigating me." Michael's face didn't change. "I needed to protect my father, the foundation, even you. If there was anything that could be used against us, I had to know." Lucas nodded, pain and understanding wrestling behind his ribs. "I'll find out who this belongs to," Michael said. "Give me 48 hours. Lucas left the room, the sound of the door clicking behind him loud and final. He didn't know what would come next. But for the first time since he found Richard on the street, he knew exactly what he was fighting for. And he wasn't backing down. 2 days passed like they carried the weight of 2 years. Lucas hardly slept, and when he did, the dreams were feverish collages of shadows, door slams, flickering lights, and the sound of his father's voice, soft, reassuring, and then suddenly gone. He didn't tell Emmy. She was still too young to understand the magnitude of a whispered name or a number scribbled on crumpled paper. He told her everything was fine, that he was working more at the foundation, that they'd have enough money this month to pay for the field trip to the observatory. That was true, at least. But beneath his words was a churning storm, made worse by the silence from Michael. Michael Holloway had said 48 hours, and Lucas believed him. But as the second day crawled toward its end and the sun sank behind a smear of lavender clouds, the silence pressed tighter on his chest. He stood by the garden wall outside the mansion, hands buried in the front pocket of his hoodie, watching the evening fall across the city in slow waves. Lights blinked on in nearby houses. Somewhere, far off, a siren wailed. Behind him, the estate's interior buzzed quietly. Cutlery, shoes on tile, murmured conversation. And still no word. Then, at the edge of the lawn, he saw Michael step out onto the balcony, phone in hand. He didn't speak, not right away, but when he caught sight of Lucas, he raised a hand. Lucas moved toward him, cautiously, as if expecting bad news to rise like smoke in the air. "I have the report," Michael said quietly. Lucas nodded once, his face unreadable. Michael gestured toward the library. Inside, the room was warmly lit, its deep shelves lined with books that smelled of leather and old dust. A fireplace flickered in the corner, giving the scene an intimacy that contrasted sharply with the coldness of what was about to be said. "It took some digging," Michael began. "The plate belongs to a vehicle registered under a shell company. That company leads back to a man named Dr. Kelvin O'Dogwu." Lucas sat slowly. "I've never heard of him." "You wouldn't have. He's not the kind of man who wants to be heard of. He's connected to several high-profile land development deals. Your father used to work in the zoning office, right?" Lucas blinked. "Yeah. He reviewed permits and environmental impact reports." Michael nodded grimly. "Dr. O'Dogwu had a major project rejected by your father's department just weeks before the incident. From what we've found, your father refused to alter the report. It would have cost O'Dogwu millions." Lucas stared into the fire. "So he had them killed?" Michael didn't answer immediately. "We have circumstantial evidence, enough to raise questions. The phone records from the night match a call from Odogwu's private line to a known gang enforcer, and that same night, that enforcer's crew was seen near your old trailer park. But Odogwu made sure nothing was direct, nothing easily traceable." "Until now," Lucas said, voice tightening. "Until now," Michael agreed. Lucas exhaled slowly. He felt like he was looking at a map he'd never seen before, but one that had always been under his feet. Streets and landmarks made of grief and memory, suddenly given names. The corners of his childhood weren't random anymore. They were calculated, designed. "I want justice," he said. "And we'll get it," Michael promised. "Carefully, legally, no shortcuts." Lucas nodded, the firelight catching the edge of a tear he didn't bother to wipe away. That night, he told his mother everything. She cried silently at the kitchen table, one hand over her mouth. Emmy slept in the other room, the hum of her nebulizer soft in the background. When the story was done, his mother looked at him not as a boy, but as something else. Older, maybe. A son with his father's eyes and his mother's will. "I'm proud of you," she said. And for the first time, Lucas let himself believe it. In the weeks that followed, the case built slowly, meticulously. Michael brought in the Holloway legal team, led by a woman named Miss Shaw, who spoke in clean, precise sentences and never made promises she couldn't back. Lucas attended every meeting he could, sitting quietly at the edge of polished tables, absorbing terms he barely understood: probable cause, chain of evidence, prosecutorial interest. Outside the boardrooms, life moved on. Emmy went to school. His mother started taking art classes again. Lucas kept volunteering at the foundation, now with a new sense of calm. He worked harder than ever, not because he needed to prove anything, but because he finally understood the power of action. The smallest gesture, a ride to the hospital, a bowl of pasta, could start a chain that stretched across lifetimes. Richard Holloway's health began to improve. The memory gaps were still there, but fewer. Sometimes he would call Lucas Daniel, and Lucas never corrected him. In the garden, they would sit together in the morning light, and Richard would tell stories from his younger days, some surely real, others suspiciously like plot lines from old movies. But Lucas listened all the same. "You know," Richard said one morning, sipping tea, "you remind me of myself, back when I thought I could change the world." "You did," Lucas said. Richard smiled sadly. "I built a company. That's not the same thing." Lucas didn't argue. He just let the silence fill the space between them. Then, in the 5th month after the investigation began, the federal court agreed to hear the case. It moved faster than expected. Someone on the inside, perhaps, eager to bring Odogwu down. The evidence, once thin, had thickened. Testimonies were collected. Stella gave a formal statement, her hands shaking as she described what she saw through her window. The gang leader, tied to the hit, had been killed in a police raid the year after Lucas's parents were murdered, but the digital trail remained. Lucas wasn't called to the stand. He didn't need to be, but he was there, every day, sitting in the second row of the courtroom behind Michael and Miss Shaw, watching the proceedings with clenched fists and tight shoulders. And when the verdict came, guilty on all counts, with a sentence of death by hanging, Lucas felt the breath leave his body like a storm passing. He didn't cheer. He didn't cry. He just closed his eyes and let the silence of justice settle deep into his bones. 2 weeks later, the execution was carried out. The story broke across the news. High-profile developer executed for orchestrated double murder. Lucas read the headline, then folded the paper and tucked it away in a box he kept under his bed. It contained only 3 things: the photo of his parents smiling at the beach, Emmy's first drawing of their family, and the crumpled paper with the license plate that had started it all. In the aftermath, life began to bloom again. Lucas was accepted into the local university with a full scholarship, courtesy of the Holloway Foundation. He chose data analytics, Michael's suggestion, and one that felt right. Numbers made sense. Patterns could be decoded. The truth, however hidden, always left a trail. Emmy enrolled in a private school for gifted children. She made friends. She painted galaxies with watercolor. She laughed more. Their mother found work at a community center, running art therapy sessions. She smiled again. She hummed while cooking. Richard, now stronger, resumed light work with the foundation. He still insisted on calling Lucas Daniel half the time, but he always remembered his favorite cookie and how he liked his tea. He started teaching Emmy chess on Saturday mornings and sometimes forgot the rules halfway through. Emmy just let him win. One evening, as the sky turned violet and gold over the estate, Lucas sat alone in the library. He wasn't reading. He was just thinking, watching the fireplace crackle. He heard footsteps behind him. "Lucas?" Michael's voice was soft. He turned. "I've been thinking," Michael said, "about your future." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "More school?" Michael chuckled. "Eventually, but also work." Lucas frowned. "Work?" "At the foundation," Michael said. "Not as a volunteer, as staff. Officially, we need someone who understands what this mission is really about. Someone who's lived it." Lucas was quiet for a long time, then he smiled. "I'd like that." The next morning, a new nameplate appeared on the door of one of the offices on the 3rd floor. Lucas Bright, Community Outreach Coordinator. He stared at it for a moment, hand resting on the polished wood, before pushing the door open and stepping inside. The desk was simple. The chair squeaked a little. The computer was newer than anything he'd used before. It felt right. And as he sat down, Lucas realized something that made his chest swell, not with pride, but with clarity. He had entered a room that once felt impossible, and he hadn't done it by chasing power or luck or fame. He had done it with a single decision. He had stopped. He had helped, not because he knew who the man in the pajamas was, but because he knew who he was. And that, more than anything else, had changed everything. The first rain of the season had come in the early hours of the morning, rinsing the dust from the city's skin and leaving behind a clean, sharp clarity that seemed to settle over every rooftop and sidewalk. In the garden, behind the Holloway estate, the hedges glistened with dew, and the leaves of the lemon trees trembled gently with the last drops clinging to their edges. Lucas stood barefoot on the stone path that curved around the lawn, watching Emmy and Richard play their slow, lopsided game of chess beneath the patio awning. Emmy was smiling, with that mischievous glint she always got when she knew she was 2 moves away from winning, and Richard was frowning at the board as if the pieces themselves had betrayed him. From a distance, the moment looked so ordinary that it might have been lifted from any peaceful Saturday morning in any good home. But Lucas knew better. Every detail, every breath, every note of laughter was something earned, something once thought impossible. He had moved fully into the Holloway estate 3 months ago, at first hesitantly, feeling like a guest overstaying his welcome, then gradually with more confidence, until the rooms that once seemed like exhibits in a museum began to feel like his. He still didn't touch the grand piano in the hallway, and he still left his shoes by the door, but the house no longer echoed with strangeness. It held warmth now. It held them. He had finished his first semester at university with top marks. The classes were hard, the pace relentless, but he loved it. Loved the logic of numbers, the thrill of solving problems, the clarity that came with translating messy human behavior into clean rows of data. At the foundation, he had taken on more responsibility, overseeing youth initiatives and mentoring new volunteers. The kids looked up to him now. Some even copied his hairstyle. But more than any of that, what mattered most was that he felt seen. Not pitied, not applauded, just seen. As a young man with purpose, as someone who belonged. He turned from the garden, following the sound of soft footsteps behind him. Michael approached from the side gate, dressed casually for once. Jeans, a dark button-down, sleeves rolled to the elbows. He held a takeaway coffee in one hand and a folded newspaper in the other. "Mornin'," Michael said, handing Lucas the cup. "Thanks." Michael nodded toward the patio. "He's losing again. I think he lets her win. I think she lets him think he's letting her win." Lucas chuckled. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, sipping coffee and watching the game unfold. "She's growing fast," Michael said. "Next year, she'll be taller than him. She already talks smarter than both of us." Michael tilted his head. "And you? You good?" Lucas hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I'm good." Michael studied him for a moment. "You've come a long way." Lucas didn't answer right away. He looked down at the cup in his hand, then back at the house. "So has this place," he said. Later that evening, Lucas found himself alone in the library, flipping through a thick binder of reports for an upcoming presentation. Outside, the rain had started again, steady and rhythmic, pattering against the tall windows like a soft drumbeat. The fire was lit, crackling quietly behind him. The room smelled of old paper and cedar wood. He was so focused he didn't hear the door open. "Lucas?" He turned. It was Richard. The old man stood straighter now, no longer needing assistance for every step. He still had his foggy days, still lost names and details, but his spirit had returned like an old friend, slipping back into his bones with quiet determination. "I didn't mean to interrupt," Richard said. "I was looking for a book, but now that I see you—" Lucas closed the binder and smiled. "Come in." Richard walked slowly to the leather armchair by the fire and lowered himself into it with a soft groan. "Everything feels so different now," he said after a moment. Lucas waited. The house, the air, the way the lights fall across the walls at night. He looked at Lucas, his eyes glassy but focused. "You changed it." Lucas opened his mouth to protest, but Richard raised a hand. "No false modesty, please. I know what I see." He leaned back, the firelight catching the lines in his face. "I built this mansion to be a fortress," he said. "A monument to what I'd accomplished. But I never filled it with life. That took someone brave enough to stop on the street and help an old man with no name." Lucas swallowed hard. "I didn't know who you were." "And that's why it mattered," Richard said. "You weren't helping a name. You were helping a person. That's rare. It's powerful." They sat like that for a while, the fire casting long shadows on the rug, the rain tapping its steady rhythm above them. Eventually, Richard stood. "I'm going to bed. I just wanted to say thank you." "Any time," Lucas said softly. The old man paused at the door. "You didn't just save me," he said. "You reminded me why I wanted to live." And then he was gone. 2 months later, Lucas stood on a brightly lit stage in a crowded conference hall in downtown Los Angeles. The Youth Empowerment Summit had invited speakers from across the country, activists, educators, community leaders. But when Lucas stepped up to the podium, a quiet hush fell over the room. Behind him, a massive screen displayed a single phrase in white letters over a black background. One act of kindness can change everything. He adjusted the microphone, looked out at the crowd, faces young and old, familiar and strange. Emmy sat in the front row, beaming. His mother sat beside her, holding her hand. Michael stood behind them, arms crossed, nodding once. Richard was there, too, sitting tall in his chair, eyes fixed on the boy who had once found him in the street and called for help when no one else would. Lucas took a breath. "My name is Lucas Bright," he said. "I'm a university student, a foundation staff member, a brother, a son. But just a couple years ago, I was a kid on a bike, delivering food in the rain, barely getting by." He paused. "And then I saw a man sitting on the sidewalk. He didn't know who he was. He didn't know where he lived. Everyone else walked past. But I stopped. I didn't know it at the time, but that one moment would change everything." He told the story not as a performance, but as a memory. He spoke about his parents, the loss, the unanswered questions. He spoke about the truth, the trial, the justice that had taken years to reach. He spoke about Richard and the mansion and the girl with the chessboard and the wise eyes. And then he said what mattered most. "I didn't save a billionaire. I helped a person. I didn't have money or power or time to spare. But I had the choice. We all do. Every day. Kindness is not about grand gestures. It's about stopping, seeing, acting, even when it's hard, even when it hurts." He looked down at Emmy and smiled. "I didn't know his name, but he helped me remember mine." The crowd rose to their feet. As he stepped down from the stage, Emmy ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. "You were amazing," she said. His mother wiped her eyes. Michael clapped him on the back. "You're just getting started." Later that evening, back at the estate, Lucas walked alone through the garden. The moon hung low and full, casting silver light over the trimmed hedges and the quiet trees. He stopped beneath the lemon tree where it had all begun for him. The first quiet morning with Richard, the first conversation about life and memory and meaning. He closed his eyes, breathing in the scent of citrus and earth and rain-washed stone. Behind him, the house glowed with light and laughter. Emmy was inside, teaching Richard a new board game. His mother was painting again, her brushes soaking in a glass jar on the kitchen windowsill. And Lucas stood in the stillness, remembering everything, not just what he had lost, but what he had found. Because sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin not with a destination, but with the decision to stop and help. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more. Check out the next video on your screen and share this one with someone who needs to hear it.